The fluorescent lights buzzed above her cubicle, a steady hum that matched the rhythm of her racing thoughts. She stared at the spreadsheet on her screen, numbers blurring together, but her mind was elsewhere. Sketching, planning, imagining. Each keystroke felt like a small rebellion against the monotony that had swallowed her days. She had an idea that could change everything, but no one seemed to care. Not her coworkers, who chatted about the weekend like it mattered more than anything else. Not her boss, who barely looked up from his phone when she greeted him that morning. Her office smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer toner, the scent clinging to her determination like a shadow. She organized papers with meticulous precision, hiding the storm of creativity that brewed behind her calm exterior. Every glance from a colleague felt like a question she couldn't answer, every smirk a silent dismissal. Yet inside her chest, ambition pounded louder than doubt. If only someone could see what she saw. The spark in a simple idea that had the power to ripple far beyond these gray walls. Lunch passed unnoticed. The clock hands crept forward, marking another day of waiting, of being overlooked, of feeling small. She sipped her lukewarm coffee, letting her thoughts wander to a future she couldn't yet touch. She imagined the headlines, the acclaim, the moment when the world would finally recognize what she had always known. But for now, she sat in silence, the office chatter around her a dull roar she couldn't break through. And then it happened. The moment she pitched her idea to her boss. A gesture, a glance, a single sound that would haunt her dreams. His laugh. Sharp, dismissive, final. Cut through her hope like a knife. She froze, the words she had rehearsed so many times now feeling fragile and foolish. Why would a simple idea provoke such a reaction from someone in power? She wanted to defend herself, to explain, to make him see the vision she had carried in secret for months. But he was already back to his phone, indifferent, leaving her standing in the quiet aftermath, her mind spinning, her determination ignited in ways she couldn't yet name. She stared at the blank page in front of her, but it wasn't blank. Not really. In her mind, colors, shapes, and possibilities danced like fireworks, a vision so vivid she could almost reach out and touch it. This was more than a plan. It was a blueprint for change. A way to shake the world of mundane processes, to cut through inefficiency like a hot knife through butter. She imagined the headlines. Revolutionary idea transforms industry overnight. And a thrill surged through her chest. But in the boardroom, when she finally voiced her thoughts, her words fell on deaf ears. Her idea wasn't complicated. It was brilliant in its simplicity. She had noticed the patterns everyone else overlooked. The repeated mistakes, the wasted time, the opportunities that vanished before anyone even realized they existed. She sketched diagrams in her notebook, rewrote sections a dozen times, analyzed every possible outcome. Every detail mattered. Every nuance could be the difference between a passing novelty and something monumental. At lunch, she pulled out a stack of notes, pacing quietly in the corner of the break room, muttering calculations under her breath. People passed by, some glancing at her with mild curiosity, others with irritation, thinking she was overcomplicating things. But she didn't care. Each scribble, each correction, each meticulous measurement was another step toward a vision she could feel but no one else could yet see. The next morning, she rehearsed the pitch again, imagining it like a story unfolding before an invisible audience. She wanted to convey not just the mechanics, but the magic. The potential to reshape how the company operated, to spark innovation on a scale no one had considered. When she finally stepped into the boardroom, heart pounding like a drum, the familiar air of indifference greeted her. She smiled, trying to mask the tension as she laid out her idea with clarity and precision. Then he laughed. A single laugh. Sharp, echoing in the silent room. It was not the polite, reserved laugh of amusement. It was derisive, a sound that cut through her confidence and left a hollow ache in its wake. Her notes trembled in her hands as the color drained from her face. Could a single dismissive laugh really hold back a game-changing idea? The question burned in her mind as she watched the other executives shift uncomfortably, some pretending not to notice, others secretly intrigued but too cautious to speak. Yet even as the laughter faded and the room returned to its dull routine, something inside her ignited. She realized that the rejection wasn't the end. It was a spark. The more they laughed, the more fuel she found for her determination. What they dismissed as folly, she knew could become triumph. And in that moment, as she left the boardroom with her notes clutched tightly, she silently vowed, they hadn't seen anything yet. Her boss leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, a smirk playing across his face that made her stomach twist. "You really think this will work?" he asked, voice dripping with mockery. The room felt smaller, air thicker, as her carefully crafted presentation seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. He tilted his head, raising an eyebrow, each gesture punctuating his disbelief. She swallowed hard, her heart hammering, but forced herself to meet his gaze. "You're ambitious," he said, "I'll give you that. But ambition isn't enough. Ideas like this, they're naive, impractical. Do you understand how risky this could be?" His words weren't just dismissive, they were designed to belittle, to remind her of the hierarchy she had yet to climb. Every syllable hit like a blow, and for a moment, the room spun around her. She had imagined excitement, challenge, maybe even applause. Instead, she was met with a wall of skepticism and disdain. Her hands clenched around her notebook, nails biting into paper as doubt began to creep in. Maybe she had misjudged it. Maybe the idea was foolish. A part of her wanted to retreat, to shove her notes back into her bag and vanish into the routine safety of spreadsheets and conference calls. But another, stronger part refused. She remembered the spark she had felt in the quiet of her apartment, the late-night scribbles, the vision that had kept her awake for weeks. That fire couldn't be extinguished by laughter or dismissive words. She left the office feeling smaller than ever, footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Her colleagues' murmurs faded into the background, replaced by a storm of conflicting emotions inside her. Anger, frustration, a simmering determination that refused to be silenced. Somewhere between the sting of humiliation and the quiet pulse of ambition, a plan began to form. Little did she know, his laughter, the single, sharp sound that had cut through her confidence, would be the fuel for her next move. The mockery, the doubt, the patronizing smirk, all of it would become a driving force, a reminder that if they couldn't see the value now, they would pay attention later. She paused at the elevator, staring at the reflection in the glass, the city lights flickering behind her. What would push someone from humiliation to unstoppable action? That question hovered in her mind, unanswered, as she pressed the button and watched the doors slide shut, hiding a resolve that was only just beginning to take shape. The office was empty now, the hum of fluorescent lights replaced by the steady tick of the wall clock. She sat at her desk, sleeves rolled up, hair falling into her eyes, and stared at her laptop screen as if it held the answers to every question she had ever asked. Outside, the streets were silent, lined with glimmering reflections of streetlights on wet asphalt. Inside, stacks of crumpled papers and empty coffee cups surrounded her, a testament to nights spent wrestling with her own vision. Every rejected email, every snicker, every dismissive glance. It all became part of her blueprint for revenge. Or success. She typed furiously, pausing only to scribble calculations on sticky notes or sketch diagrams in her notebook. The numbers didn't lie. The patterns were there, hidden in plain sight. If she could just connect them, tweak the sequence, refine the approach, she might have something unstoppable. Her mind raced faster than her fingers, bouncing between possibilities, alternate paths, and worst-case scenarios. Each idea seemed better than the last, yet she knew perfection would come only after testing, failing, and adjusting. The dim desk lamp cast long shadows across the walls, stretching her imagination into shapes that flickered like specters of her ambition. The quiet of the night amplified every thought, every doubt, every heartbeat. Somewhere deep in her chest, determination roared louder than exhaustion. She wasn't just working on a project anymore. She was crafting a lifeline out of an idea that others had laughed at, turning ridicule into fuel. Hours passed unnoticed. She sipped coffee that had long gone cold, muttering to herself, rearranging sequences, questioning assumptions, and plotting contingencies. The city outside seemed to hold its breath along with her, waiting for a breakthrough that could change everything. And then, a sudden realization hit her. Could this idea be hers alone to sell? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. If no one had believed in it, if her boss had laughed, perhaps this was an opportunity to claim it entirely for herself, outside the walls that had constrained her for so long. The possibilities were intoxicating, dangerous, and exhilarating all at once. Could she really transform a dismissed idea into something unstoppable? Her pulse quickened as she imagined the future, a world where her vision wasn't mocked but celebrated, where the laughter that had once cut so deeply became the echo of her triumph. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling, mind racing with plans yet untested, each one more daring than the last. The night deepened, and the office grew colder, shadows stretching like fingers across the floor. Outside, a single taxi passed, its headlights briefly illuminating the determination etched on her face. And as she whispered to herself, plotting the steps she would take, one thought lingered above all others, unresolved and electrifying. What if no one could stop her now? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, a sense of triumph simmering just beneath the surface. After weeks of late nights, calculations, sketches, and endless revisions, she finally believed she had a breakthrough. The prototype was nearly complete, the model functional, the numbers lining up with almost perfect precision. She leaned back, eyes closing for a brief moment, imagining the headlines, the recognition, the validation. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel that sweet taste of victory. And then disaster struck. The server crashed. Files she had meticulously backed up seemed to vanish, corrupted beyond recovery. The software she relied on glitched, undoing hours of adjustments and forcing her to retrace steps that had taken days to perfect. Her heart sank, stomach twisting as panic clawed at her composure. She stared at the screen, blinking rapidly, willing it to resolve itself, willing the lost data to magically reappear. But the reality was cold, harsh, and undeniable. Just when she thought she had a breakthrough, it felt like the universe had conspired to snatch it away. She sank into her chair, frustration bubbling into anger. The idea that had consumed her nights, haunted her days, and fueled her ambition now seemed fragile, vulnerable to forces beyond her control. Doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering that perhaps she wasn't ready, that the laughter, the dismissals, the late nights had been for nothing. But she shook her head. Defeat wasn't an option. Not now. Not ever. Her mind shifted from despair to strategy. She would not allow a technical failure to define the limits of her potential. Fingers trembling but determined, she began reconstructing what was lost, reworking calculations, reassembling fragments of the prototype. Every misstep, every corrupted file, every exhausted hour became a challenge she refused to surrender to. The setback was real, but so was her resolve. Even as she worked, questions gnawed at her. Could she recover in time? Would the model function when she needed it most? And amidst the chaos, a spark of curiosity flickered. Maybe this failure was not the end, but the start of something bigger. Maybe the obstacles themselves would shape her idea into something stronger, something unstoppable. She glanced at the clock. Hours had passed without her noticing. Her hands ached, her eyes burned, yet she felt alive in a way only crises could make a person feel. The setback had arrived like a storm, threatening to wash away everything she had built, but beneath the fear, determination roared louder. Was this the end of her dream? Or the beginning of something bigger? She didn't yet know. But as she stared at the fractured pieces of her work, plotting the next move, a single thought pulsed in her mind, relentless and demanding. How do you turn a crushing setback into an opportunity? The coffee shop was nearly empty, the scent of roasted beans mingling with the crisp evening air drifting through the open windows. She sat in the corner, laptop open, papers spread around her like a fortress of ambition. Every plan, every calculation, every line she had rewritten a dozen times waited for validation, and she felt the familiar knot of doubt tighten in her chest. That's when he appeared. A calm presence, sharp eyes scanning the room, settling on her with an intensity that made her straighten in her seat. "I've been following your work," he said, voice low but confident, sliding a folder across the table. "You're onto something big." She blinked, suspicion and hope clashing in her mind. In a world where dismissals and laughter had been constant companions, here was someone who believed in what she couldn't yet see for herself. He asked questions that cut through the surface, probing for details she hadn't shared with anyone. She felt the thrill of someone finally understanding the vision she had carried alone, of someone seeing the potential buried beneath late nights and endless revisions. They spoke in whispers, leaning closer as if the walls themselves were listening. He challenged her assumptions, pushed her to clarify weak points, and yet never mocked or dismissed her. With every answer, every nod, she felt the momentum of her idea gathering strength. Perhaps this was the ally she had been waiting for, the one who could help her navigate beyond the corporate walls that had confined her for so long. But trust didn't come easily. Years of ridicule, missed opportunities, and betrayal had sharpened her instincts. Could she really trust someone after so many setbacks and false hopes? She weighed every word, every gesture, searching for signs of ulterior motives. His confidence was magnetic, his insight undeniable, yet the cautious part of her whispered that alliances could be fragile. One wrong move, and the fragile momentum of her dream could crumble. As they parted that evening, a plan was forming, a path that promised progress but demanded secrecy, precision, and faith. The city outside glimmered with possibility, the streets alive with motion, yet inside her chest, a quiet storm of ambition surged. Her former boss, the one who had laughed, would soon see that his dismissal meant nothing in the face of determination and strategy. Would this new ally be the key to millions? Or another obstacle in disguise? She closed her laptop with deliberate calm, yet the question lingered, sharp and unresolved, echoing in the quiet hum of the coffee shop as she stepped into the night, plotting the next move that could change everything. The morning light filtered through the blinds, painting stripes across her desk as she sat in tense anticipation. The prototype, polished and perfected through weeks of sleepless nights and endless revisions, sat ready on her laptop. Fingers hovering above the keyboard, she could feel the weight of every expectation, every sneer from the past, pressing down on her. Today was the day. Every second felt like a lifetime as she pressed send, releasing her idea into the world for the first time. The silence afterward was deafening. She held her breath, eyes darting to the screen, tracking the progress bar, each percentage point crawling forward like a heartbeat. Small victories came in fleeting flashes. Emails confirmed receipt, minor bugs corrected, the first few users testing the system without complaint. Her stomach churned as doubt crept in. What if it failed? What if years of ridicule and dismissal had been justified? She leaned back, shoulders tense, trying to steady her racing heart. The office around her was quiet, the hum of computers and air conditioning the only soundtrack to her anxiety. She watched as the first metrics rolled in. Tiny sparks of success that hinted at something bigger. A single positive response, then another, then another. But every triumph was mirrored by a nagging fear, a delayed email, a frozen interface, a misread notification. Each obstacle threatened to unravel weeks of work in an instant, and she fought the urge to panic. Then, the response was instantaneous. And shocking. Notifications flooded her screen, social media mentions multiplying faster than she could track, investors reaching out, journalists asking for interviews. The world had noticed, and her vision, once dismissed and laughed at, was alive. The surge of validation was intoxicating, yet it brought a new kind of tension. Attention, scrutiny, and the unspoken question of sustainability. Could this success be maintained, or would it fizzle as quickly as it had ignited? Her phone buzzed again. A message from her mentor, "They're watching. Be ready." She understood immediately. This was more than recognition. It was competition, envy, and the inevitable challenge of scaling something that had started as a personal vision. Every achievement now carried the weight of expectation, and every misstep could be magnified. She took a deep breath, eyes scanning the flood of data, the excited comments, the inquiries. Her idea, once mocked and dismissed, was no longer a secret. But in the midst of triumph, a question lingered, sharp and relentless. Could her idea really succeed despite years of doubt and ridicule? The city outside glimmered with morning energy, cars streaming past, unaware of the quiet revolution that had begun from one woman's determination. Inside, she sat poised, hands hovering above the keyboard again, heart still racing, mind already calculating the next move, aware that this launch was only the beginning. And the real test had just begun. The notifications didn't stop. Every ding of her phone was a pulse of validation. Emails from journalists, inquiries from investors, messages from strangers praising the ingenuity of her idea. Suddenly, her idea wasn't just hers, everyone wanted it. Sales numbers climbed faster than she could track, social media buzz amplified every feature she had agonized over, and industry forums debated the innovation she had brought to life. Triumph filled her chest, but it was tempered with a tight knot of tension that refused to loosen. Meetings became a blur. Calls with potential partners, interviews with reporters, and strategic discussions with her mentor consumed every waking hour. She felt a surge of adrenaline with each success, yet even in the moments of excitement, a whisper of doubt crept in. What if a competitor replicated the idea? What if a flaw she hadn't seen unraveled everything? The higher she climbed, the more precarious the balance became. Her mentor watched closely, guiding, advising, cautioning. He reminded her to focus, to protect her intellectual property, to measure every step. But the whirlwind of attention threatened to overwhelm her, even as she celebrated small victories. First major sales contracts, glowing reviews, unexpected media coverage. The shadow of her old boss loomed in her mind. The one who had laughed, the one who had dismissed her months ago, was now part of her imagined audience, a reminder that doubt and ridicule had once defined her reality. Still, she pressed forward. She refined presentations, adjusted pitches, and responded personally to early customers, balancing the need for perfection with the urgency of momentum. Every decision carried weight, every move scrutinized not only by the world but by herself. Success was exhilarating, but it was also fragile, like glass glinting in sunlight, beautiful but easy to shatter. In quiet moments, she questioned herself. Could she maintain this level of success without losing herself in the process? The fame, the validation, the financial windfall. All of it was intoxicating, but she felt the pull of who she had been before the idea, the late nights alone in her office, the determination that had fueled every step. Could ambition coexist with integrity? Could she stay grounded while the world clamored for a piece of her vision? Outside, the city moved as if oblivious to the storm of transformation she had unleashed. Inside, she paused at her desk, staring at the growing numbers on her screen, feeling both exhilarated and wary. Triumph had arrived, but it carried the weight of new questions, unseen pressures, and the silent shadow of those who had underestimated her. The stakes had never been higher, and the question lingered, unresolved. Could she maintain her success without losing herself? The boardroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the faint hum of the air conditioning doing little to calm her racing heart. She entered with measured steps, every eye on her, including the one that mattered most. Her former boss. The man who had laughed, dismissed, and underestimated her now sat behind the same desk that had once made her feel small, his expression a mixture of surprise, irritation, and curiosity. The same person who laughed at her now had to watch her triumph. He cleared his throat, leaning back, fingers tapping lightly on the surface in a rhythm that felt almost menacing. "I hear things are going well for you," he said, words coated with a thin layer of skepticism. "Interesting. But let's be realistic. How sustainable is this success? Could it last?" His challenge hung in the air like a threat, a test of her resolve. She met his gaze without flinching, letting confidence ripple through every movement. Months of late nights, endless revisions, setbacks, and triumphs had led to this moment. She laid out the numbers, the contracts, the media coverage. Proof that her vision had become reality, undeniable and powerful. Every slide, every chart, every documented achievement was a testament to what they had once mocked. He frowned, leaning forward, trying to find fault, a weak link, a reason to reclaim authority or diminish her accomplishment. But she anticipated his moves, countered his skepticism with clarity and poise, and spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had risked everything to succeed. Each objection he raised only reinforced her preparation, her conviction, and her understanding of the idea's potential. Her team watched in silence, a mix of admiration and awe reflecting in their eyes. She had transformed rejection into strategy, mockery into motivation, and now the narrative had shifted. The same laughter that had haunted her dreams had been replaced by respect, recognition, and undeniable results. And yet, even in this victory, a subtle tension lingered. She felt the exhilaration of vindication, the surge of validation, but also the quiet whisper of something incomplete. Was this the ultimate revenge? Or just the start of her real legacy? The question pressed against her chest as she stood tall, absorbing the room's energy and the realization that triumph could be both satisfying and merely the beginning. She had proven herself, conquered doubt, and faced the man who once belittled her, but the story wasn't over. Something larger waited, a horizon beyond approval or money, a purpose that demanded more than victory. As she left the room, the city lights outside reflected the glimmer of possibility, and the question lingered, electric and unresolved. What comes after triumph when the world finally listens? She sank into the leather chair of her new office, the sunlight spilling across polished floors and glass walls. The view of the city stretched endlessly before her, a reminder of how far she had come from the cramped cubicle where laughter and dismissal had once shadowed her every move. She had millions, respect, and the world finally noticed. But the story didn't end there. This wasn't just a financial triumph. It was the quiet validation of every risk, every late night, every moment she had refused to surrender to doubt. Her journey replayed in her mind like a vivid montage. The early days of scribbled notebooks, the endless revisions, the gnawing fear that she was chasing a dream no one else could see. She remembered the laughter, the mocking glances, the moments of self-doubt that threatened to break her spirit. Each setback had been a challenge, each obstacle a lesson. And now, sitting in the calm after the storm, she realized that what had once felt like ridicule had been the fuel for resilience, the spark for creativity, and the test of her persistence. Emails from investors and collaborators lined her inbox, glowing with excitement and opportunity. She reviewed contracts, strategic plans, and expansion proposals, each a testament to the vision she had nurtured in secret. She thought about the people who had doubted her, the boss who laughed, the colleagues who whispered, the world that didn't initially see the potential. But she didn't feel the need for revenge anymore. Triumph wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right, and that satisfaction was deeper, quieter, and infinitely more fulfilling. Yet even in her victory, a restless energy pulsed within her. She had conquered obstacles that once seemed insurmountable, but her mind was already reaching forward, imagining what could come next. What would she create now that nothing could stop her? The idea that had once been dismissed had grown into something bigger than she had anticipated, and she knew that this was only the beginning. There were new challenges, new innovations, and uncharted paths waiting for someone bold enough to take the leap. She reflected on the lesson woven into every chapter of her journey. Resilience wasn't simply enduring hardship. It was using failure, rejection, and doubt as stepping stones. Creativity thrived in the space between frustration and determination. Persistence wasn't about stubbornness. It was about belief, discipline, and the courage to keep moving when the world says no. These truths, she realized, were more valuable than any contract, headline, or bank balance. Looking out over the city, a smile touched her lips. She had turned a dismissed idea into a revolution, a simple spark into a blaze that now illuminated possibilities she had never imagined. And yet, the horizon called her forward, whispering of more to build, more to achieve, more to challenge the limits of what was possible. The story had reached a milestone, but not its conclusion. She leaned back, eyes bright with determination, and let herself wonder aloud, what would she create next, now that nothing could stop her? And beyond that, what would you do if the world laughed at your idea first, but left you the chance to prove it could change everything?